The Galactic Hunting Federation had ruled the stars for over 10,000 years. And frankly, they were getting a bit bored with the whole thing. When you've successfully hunted every apex predator across 47 different star systems, the thrill tends to wear off faster than a discount spacesuit in a meteor shower. Commander Vex'tar lounged in his crystalline throne aboard the Federation flagship, his reptilian scales gleaming under the artificial suns of the command bridge. As the supreme commander of the most feared hunting organization in the galaxy, he had personally bagged everything from the acid-spitting vortex serpents of Kepler 442 billion to the phase-shifting terror cats of the Andromeda spiral. His trophy room was so extensive it required its own space station. Another successful hunt. Commander, Admiral Krynn clicked through her mandibles, her insectoid form perfectly still as she reviewed the latest mission reports. Where Vex'tar was all swagger and scales, Krynn was pure calculating precision. Her compound eyes could process tactical data faster than most species could blink, and her strategic mind had orchestrated the Federation's expansion across half the known galaxy. The plasma bears of Rigel 7 have been officially classified as extinct. General Thok'mor grunted his approval from across the bridge, his massive frame barely fitting into the reinforced command chair. Standing nearly 12 feet tall with arms that could crush starship hulls, Thok'mor represented the Federation's more direct approach to problem-solving. While Vex'tar planned and Krynn strategized, Thok'mor simply smashed things until they stopped moving. It was remarkably effective. The Federation operated on a simple principle that had served them well for millennia. The galaxy was divided into hunters and prey, and they were very definitely the hunters. Their membership consisted exclusively of apex predators from across the galaxy, species that had climbed to the top of their respective food chains through superior strength, cunning, or sheer bloody-mindedness. They hunted not for food or resources, but for the pure joy of proving their superiority over every other living thing in the universe. Their trophy halls were legendary. Mounted heads of creatures that had terrorized entire civilizations lined the walls of Federation stations. The preserved remains of the last Titan wolves of Proxima Centauri stood next to the crystallized corpses of the reality-bending phantoms of the Magellanic Clouds. Each trophy represented not just a successful hunt, but the complete domination of an entire species. Sir, Lieutenant Scarthok interrupted, his young voice trembling with excitement. Our deep space scouts have discovered something extraordinary. A new species, completely uncharted, on a small blue world in the outer rim. Vex'tar's eyes gleamed with predatory interest. Another apex predator? The lieutenant's mandibles clicked nervously. Actually, sir, quite the opposite. They appear to be the most pathetic prey species we've ever encountered. No natural weapons, terrible eyesight, barely any muscle mass. They're soft, weak, and completely defenseless. The scouts are calling them humans. The bridge fell silent, except for the low hum of the ship's engines. Vex'tar exchanged glances with Krynn and Thok'mor. After 10,000 years of hunting the galaxy's most dangerous creatures, they had finally found something new, the ultimate prey species. Prepare the hunting declaration, Vex'tar commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. This Earth will become our newest hunting preserve. Alert all Federation members, we've found our next great hunt. The Galactic Hunting Federation had no idea they were about to make the biggest mistake in their 10,000-year history. 3 weeks later, a small Federation scout ship dropped out of hyperspace, just beyond Earth's moon, completely invisible to human detection systems. The ship's occupant, Hunting Inspector Zalthek, reviewed his mission parameters with the careful attention of someone who had evaluated prey species across 17 different galaxies. Zalthek was what humans might generously describe as a cross between a praying mantis and a particularly unpleasant tax auditor. His species had evolved from apex predators who specialized in psychological warfare, making them perfect for the delicate task of prey evaluation. His job was simple: assess the local species, determine hunting protocols, and establish the preserve boundaries. The inspector materialized in the middle of the United Nations General Assembly during a particularly heated debate about parking regulations in low Earth orbit. The sudden appearance of a 7-foot-tall insectoid alien caused exactly the sort of chaos you'd expect, which is to say that most delegates immediately began arguing about whose jurisdiction extraterrestrial visitors fell under. "Greetings, primitive creatures," Zalthak announced in perfect English, his translator having analyzed human communication patterns during the 3-second flight from his ship. "I am Hunting Inspector Zalthak of the Galactic Hunting Federation. I am here to evaluate your species for inclusion in our preserve system." Ambassador Reynolds, a career diplomat who had somehow survived 40 years of international politics, stepped forward with the sort of forced smile typically reserved for particularly difficult trade negotiations. "Welcome to Earth. I'm Ambassador Reynolds, and I'd be delighted to discuss any sort of cultural exchange program you might have in mind." Dr. Maya Patel, the xenobiologist who had been hastily summoned from her lab at Columbia University, clutched her tablet with barely contained excitement. Finally, actual aliens. This was the moment she'd been preparing for her entire career, even if they did look like something that would send most people running for the nearest can of bug spray. Cultural exchange? Zalthak's mandibles clicked in what his species considered laughter. "Oh, you adorable little prey creature. There's been a misunderstanding. You see, the Galactic Hunting Federation has evaluated your species and determined that you represent the perfect hunting stock. Soft, defenseless, with no natural weapons or enhanced senses. You're exactly what we've been looking for." The General Assembly fell silent, which was probably the first time in Yunnan history that it ever happened. "I'm sorry," Ambassador Reynolds said, his diplomatic training kicking in, "but I think there might be some confusion here. We're not actually interested in being hunted. We have laws against that sort of thing." Zalthak tilted his head with the patronizing patience of someone explaining basic concepts to a particularly slow child. "Laws? Oh, that's precious. You see, little prey thing, laws are made by predators for predators. Prey species don't get to make laws. You get to run, hide, and provide sport for your betters." Dr. Patel had been frantically taking notes throughout the entire exchange, her scientific mind racing with questions. "Fascinating. So you're saying your entire civilization is organized around hunting other species? What's your population distribution? How do you handle resource allocation? Do you have any natural predators of your own?" The inspector blinked his compound eyes in confusion. Most prey species either cowered in terror or begged for mercy when confronted with their fate. This small female seemed genuinely curious about the mechanics of her own impending doom. Well, that's not really important," Zalthak stammered. "The point is, your world has been designated as Hunting Preserve Epsilon 7. You have exactly 3 Earth months to prepare yourselves. The Federation's elite hunting parties will arrive shortly thereafter to begin the culling process." Ambassador Reynolds nodded thoughtfully, as if the alien had just proposed a minor adjustment to a trade agreement. "I see. And would this hunting be regulated in any way? Seasonal restrictions? Bag limits? Environmental impact assessments? Bag limits?" Zalthak was beginning to suspect that either his translator was malfunctioning, or these humans were significantly more dense than initial scans had indicated. "Your prey. There are no limits. You run, we hunt, you die. It's the natural order of the universe." Dr. Patel raised her hand like an eager student. "Quick question, are you apex predators on your own world, or are you more of a mid-tier species? Because from an evolutionary perspective, your exoskeleton suggests you might actually be more defensive than offensive in nature, which would make you more prey than predator, according to standard ecological models." Zalthak's mandibles clicked frantically. That's completely irrelevant. The Federation has spoken. 3 months, and then the hunt begins. With that, the inspector vanished in a flash of light, leaving behind only the faint smell of ozone and the growing realization that humanity had just been declared open season by the galaxy's self-appointed apex predators. Ambassador Reynolds turned to Dr. Patel with the sort of calm that comes from years of dealing with impossible situations. "Well, that was interesting. I suppose we should probably tell someone about this." Dr. Patel was already pulling out her phone. "I'm calling Captain Morrison. If anyone knows how to handle an invasive species problem, it's him." Captain Jack Morrison had been enjoying a perfectly normal Tuesday morning, which in his line of work meant dealing with a pack of feral bears that had somehow learned to operate doorknobs. As Earth's premier wildlife management specialist. A job title that sounded much better than professional problem solver for when nature gets too big for its britches. Jack had handled everything from genetically modified super mosquitoes to that unfortunate incident with the artificially intelligent honeybees. His phone rang just as he finished explaining to the bears that breaking and entering was still illegal, regardless of species. Morrison here. Please tell me this isn't about the dolphins again. Jack, it's Maya. We have a situation that's a bit outside our usual parameters. How quickly can you get to the UN building? Define bit outside our usual parameters. Are we talking mutant raccoons or more of a nature has evolved thumbs and credit card situation? More like aliens have declared Earth a hunting preserve and given us 3 months to prepare situation. Jack paused, considered his options, and reached for his emergency bottle of bourbon. On my way. 2 hours later, Jack sat in a hastily assembled crisis meeting that included Ambassador Reynolds, Dr. Patel, and roughly half the world's military leadership. The mood was somewhere between impending doom and Tuesday morning staff meeting, which was pretty much Jack's comfort zone. So let me get this straight, Jack said, reviewing the preliminary reports. These Federation guys have been hunting apex predators across the galaxy for 10,000 years. They've never encountered a species they couldn't kill. And they think we're the galactic equivalent of farm-raised turkeys. That's an accurate if somewhat unflattering summary, Ambassador Reynolds replied. Dr. Patel leaned forward excitedly. But here's the interesting part. I've been analyzing the data from Zalthak's ship, and their entire civilization is built around hunting other species. They have no experience with prey that fights back using technology, tactics, or collaborative strategies. General Patterson, a man who had spent 30 years dealing with various global crises, rubbed his temples. Dr. Patel, are you suggesting we fight back against an interstellar hunting organization? I'm suggesting, Dr. Patel said with the dangerous enthusiasm of a scientist who had just discovered something fascinating, that they've never encountered a species like us. Every other species they've hunted has been either pure predator or pure prey. Humans are something different entirely. Jack nodded slowly. She's right. In the wildlife management business, the most dangerous animals aren't the big predators. They're the adaptable ones. The ones that can learn, improvise, and hold grudges. Over the next 3 months, humanity did what humanity does best when faced with an existential threat. They got organized, they got creative, and they got absolutely vindictive about the whole thing. Dr. Patel's xenobiology team worked around the clock to analyze every scrap of data they could extract from Zalthak's brief visit. They discovered that the Federation species, for all their boasting about being apex predators, had never actually evolved in competitive environments. Each species had dominated their home world so completely that they had no experience with peers, much less with prey that could fight back. Look at this, Maya explained to the assembled military leaders, her tablet displaying biological scans. The Vex'tar species evolved from ambush predators and low-competition environments. They're physically powerful but strategically inflexible. Krynn's people are tactical geniuses, but they've never faced an opponent that could match their information processing speed. And Thok'mor's species is pure brute force. They've never encountered a problem they couldn't solve by hitting it harder. Jack grinned, the same expression he wore when he figured out how to relocate a particularly stubborn pack of wolves. So what you're telling me is that they're specialists, and we're generalists. Exactly. They're each perfectly adapted for hunting specific types of prey under controlled conditions. We're adapted for surviving anything the universe can throw at us, including each other. The military response was swift and comprehensive. Jack found himself appointed as Interspecies Wildlife Management Coordinator, which was possibly the most ridiculous job title in human history, but came with an unlimited budget and carte blanche to implement whatever solutions he deemed necessary. Teams of engineers began working on what they cheerfully called hunter management protocols. If you've ever wondered what happens when you give human engineers 3 months to prepare for an alien invasion, the answer involves a disturbing amount of creativity and a suspicious enthusiasm for the phrase, "Let's see how they handle this." Meanwhile, Ambassador Reynolds began what he described as preemptive diplomatic preparations, which mostly involved setting up the most aggressively helpful welcome committee in human history. As the 3-month deadline approached, Earth was ready. Not ready in the way the Federation expected. There were no cowering masses or desperate last stands. Instead, there was the sort of quiet, determined preparation that humans typically reserved for things like tax season or family reunions. The Federation was about to learn why humanity had become the dominant species on a planet that was actively trying to kill everything on it. The Federation's elite hunting fleet dropped out of hyperspace right on schedule, their sleek ships gleaming in Earth's sunlight like chrome death from above. Commander Vex'tar stood on the bridge of his flagship, practically vibrating with anticipation. 10,000 years of hunting. And this would be the crowning achievement. The complete subjugation of an entire species of perfect prey. Scanning the surface now. Commander, reported Lieutenant Scarthok. Population approximately 8 billion, distributed across 7 continents. No significant defensive installations detected. They appear to be going about their normal daily activities. Vex'tar's scaled lips pulled back in what his species considered a smile. Excellent. They haven't even bothered to hide. This will be over quickly. He activated the fleet-wide communication system. Attention, hunters. The prey awaits. Remember, this is a hunting preserve, not a military operation. We want sport, not slaughter. Take your time, enjoy the hunt. Admiral Krynn's tactical squadron descended toward the heavily forested regions of North America, her compound eyes analyzing potential hunting grounds with mechanical precision. General Thok'mor's brute force division headed for the urban centers, eager to test their strength against human engineering. Vex'tar himself led the command team toward what appeared to be a large gathering of humans in an open field, probably some sort of primitive worship ceremony. None of them noticed the small, hand-lettered signs that had been posted along every road, trail, and footpath on Earth. Signs that read, "Welcome, Galactic Hunters. Please check in at your local visitor information center for complimentary maps, refreshments, and safety briefings." Vex'tar's team landed in what their orbital scans had identified as a perfect hunting ground, a vast open plain with minimal cover where prey would have nowhere to hide. Instead, they found themselves in the middle of what appeared to be a festival. Thousands of humans milled about, many wearing matching t-shirts that read "Welcome to Earth, mind the wildlife." A small, elderly human woman approached Vex'tar's landing party with the sort of determined cheerfulness typically reserved for aggressive hospitality. "You must be the visiting hunters. I'm Margaret, your designated visitor relations coordinator. We've been so excited to meet you." Vex'tar blinked his predatory eyes in confusion. "Visitor relations, what? We're here to hunt you." "Oh yes, we know. And we're absolutely thrilled. Now, I have your orientation packets right here," Margaret said, pulling out a stack of professionally printed brochures. These include local maps, safety guidelines, emergency contact numbers, and a complete list of local regulations you'll need to follow during your stay. "Regulations?" Vex'tar sputtered. "We're apex predators. We don't follow regulations." Margaret's smile never wavered, but something dangerous flickered in her eyes. "Oh dear, I'm afraid everyone needs to follow safety regulations. It's for your own protection, really. Earth can be quite dangerous if you don't know what you're doing." Meanwhile, Admiral Krynn's tactical squad was discovering that Earth's forests had apparently been redesigned by someone with an advanced degree in psychological warfare. The trail signs were helpful to the point of being insulting. "Dangerous terrain ahead. Please watch your step." And caution, local wildlife may be protective of territory. But somehow, despite following the clearly marked trails, her squad kept ending up exactly where they had started. "This is impossible," Krynn clicked to her second-in-command. "The terrain doesn't match our orbital scans. These paths should lead deeper into the hunting grounds, not back to the landing site." What Krynn didn't know was that every trail sign, every path marker, and every helpful directional arrow had been carefully repositioned by teams of Eagle Scouts working under Dr. Patel's supervision. The local Boy Scout troops had taken to the project with the sort of enthusiasm typically reserved for merit badge competitions. General Thok'mor's experience was going even worse. His brute force squad had landed in downtown Manhattan, expecting to find cowering humans hiding in their primitive dwellings. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by helpful New Yorkers offering directions, restaurant recommendations, and unsolicited advice about the subway system. "You lost, big guy?" asked a taxi driver, leaning out his window to address the 12-foot alien warrior. "You look lost." "First time in the city?" "I am General Thok'mor of the Federation," the alien rumbled, his voice carrying the authority of 10,000 successful hunts. "I am here to hunt your species." "Yeah, that's nice," the cabbie replied, completely unimpressed. "You still look lost. You want directions or what?" "I got places to be." Thok'mor was beginning to understand why his species had never bothered hunting in urban environments. It wasn't that the prey was dangerous, it was that they were apparently too dense to realize they were in danger. Back at the festival, Margaret was still cheerfully explaining local regulations to an increasingly frustrated Vex'tar. Now, hunting season doesn't officially begin until after the safety briefing, which starts in about 20 minutes. We'll be covering local flora and fauna, potential hazards, and proper wilderness etiquette. There's also a short quiz at the end. "A quiz?" Vex'tar's voice rose to what could charitably be described as a shriek. "Oh yes, we can't have visitors wandering around without proper preparation. Earth has some very unique environmental challenges. For instance, did you know that our local insects can be quite territorial? And some of our plants produce airborne toxins that can cause severe allergic reactions in visitors from off-world?" As if summoned by her words, a cloud of mosquitoes descended on Vex'tar's team. Within minutes, the galaxy's most feared predators were swatting frantically at insects roughly 1,000th their size, their scales itching from dozens of tiny bites. "This is not how hunting is supposed to work," Vex'tar muttered, scratching at a particularly irritating bite behind his left ear. Margaret handed him a bottle of insect repellent with a smile that was beginning to look distinctly predatory. "Welcome to Earth, Commander. We do hope you enjoy your stay." Part 5. The Hunted Become Hunters. By the end of the first day, the Federation's hunting expedition had devolved into something between a nature documentary and a disaster movie. The galaxy's most feared predators found themselves dealing with problems they had never encountered in 10,000 years of hunting: bureaucracy, aggressive hospitality, and the growing suspicion that their prey was having far too much fun with the whole situation. Dr. Maya Patel watched the proceedings from her mobile command center, a converted food truck that she had somehow managed to get funded as xenobiological research equipment. Her team had been tracking the alien hunters using their own technology. The Federation hunting equipment turned out to be remarkably easy to hack when you weren't limited by the assumption that your prey couldn't use computers. "Commander Vex'tar's team has been stuck at the visitor orientation for 6 hours, reported her assistant, a graduate student who was having the time of his life. They're currently on their 3rd safety briefing and haven't even made it to the actual quiz yet." Maya nodded, making notes on her tablet. "And Admiral Krynn's tactical squad?" "Still lost in Central Park. The Boy Scouts relocated all the trail markers again last night. At this rate, they'll be wandering in circles until next Tuesday." The genius of humanity's response wasn't in fighting the aliens. It was in treating them exactly like what they claimed to be: tourists. Dangerous, potentially lethal tourists, but tourists nonetheless. And humanity had decades of experience dealing with tourists who didn't understand local customs, couldn't read the signs, and had no idea what they were getting themselves into. Captain Jack Morrison's contribution to the effort was perhaps the most diabolical. Instead of trying to hide humanity's capabilities, he had decided to demonstrate them through what he cheerfully called educational outreach programs. "General Thok'mor," Jack said, approaching the increasingly frustrated alien warrior with the confident swagger of someone who had personally relocated 17 different apex predator species. "I understand you're here for the hunting experience. Mind if I show you a few local techniques?" Thok'mor, who had spent the morning being aggressively helped by New Yorkers and was beginning to suspect that humans were far more dangerous than they appeared, nodded warily. Jack led the general to a nearby construction site, where a crew was demolishing an old building. "See, the thing about humans is that we're tool users. We don't have claws or fangs, so we had to get creative. He pointed to the wrecking ball as it slammed into the building's side. We call this One Tuesday Morning in Manhattan. Thok'mor watched in growing horror as the humans systematically reduced a structure larger than his ship to rubble in less than an hour, using nothing but mechanical implements and casual conversation. Of course, Jack continued conversationally, that's just for buildings. When we need to deal with biological threats, we get really creative. He handed Thok'mor a tablet displaying video footage of various human military operations. This is what we do to invasive species that threaten our territory. The general watched footage of human soldiers conducting operations with a level of coordination and tactical precision that would have impressed Admiral Krynn if she hadn't been busy getting lost in a park that somehow kept rearranging itself. Meanwhile, Ambassador Reynolds was conducting what he described as cultural exchange sessions with the surviving members of Zalthak's advance team. The inspector had returned to Earth expecting to oversee a smooth hunting operation and instead found himself sitting in a conference room being offered tea and cookies while Reynolds enthusiastically explained human social structures. "The fascinating thing about our species," Reynolds said, pouring tea with the practiced efficiency of a career diplomat, "is that we're simultaneously the most cooperative and most competitive species on our planet. We can work together to accomplish incredible things, but we also have a tendency to hold grudges for remarkably long periods of time." Zalthak shifted uncomfortably in his chair, which had been specifically designed for human proportions, and was making his exoskeleton ache. "I'm beginning to think there may have been some miscommunication about your species classification." "Oh, I don't think there was any miscommunication at all," Reynolds replied, his diplomatic smile never wavering. "You classified us as prey, and we classified you as an invasive species. Both classifications are quite accurate, from a certain point of view." The inspector's mandibles clicked nervously. "Invasive species?" "Any organism that disrupts the natural balance of an ecosystem," Dr. Patel chimed in, entering the conference room with an armload of research data. "Generally speaking, invasive species either adapt to the local environment or get removed by it. We're still collecting data on which category you fall into." Outside the conference room, the Federation's hunters were learning exactly what it meant to be classified as an invasive species by a planet that had spent millions of years trying to kill everything on it. Earth's wildlife, having been extensively briefed by Dr. Patel's team about the alien visitors, had decided to treat the hunters like any other intrusive element. Vex'tar's team discovered that Earth's insects were remarkably persistent and seemed to have developed a specific preference for alien blood. Krynn's tactical squad found that Earth's plants had an unfortunate tendency to cause allergic reactions in visitors from low biodiversity worlds. And Thok'mor's brutes learned that Earth's urban wildlife, particularly rats, pigeons, and squirrels, had absolutely no fear of things that were supposed to be apex predators. The breaking point came when Admiral Krynn, in a fit of tactical frustration, decided to use her squad's advanced hunting technology to track down and eliminate what she assumed was the leadership of the human resistance. Her sensors led her team to a nondescript building in suburban Virginia, where they burst through the doors expecting to find a military command center. Instead, they found themselves in the middle of a PTA meeting. "Oh, wonderful," exclaimed the meeting chairwoman, a kindergarten teacher named Mrs. Henderson. "Are you the guest speakers about space exploration? The children will be so excited." 20 minutes later, Admiral Krynn found herself standing in front of a classroom full of 5-year-olds, but trying to explain galactic hunting traditions to an audience that was more interested in whether she could do the chicken dance. It was at this point that the Federation began to suspect they might have made a tactical error. The end came not with a bang, but with a strongly worded letter from the Better Business Bureau. After 2 weeks of what could charitably be described as cultural misunderstandings, the surviving members of the Federation hunting expedition found themselves gathered in the UN General Assembly building, where Ambassador Reynolds was preparing to conduct what he cheerfully referred to as exit negotiations. Commander Vex'tar sat in a chair that was slightly too small for his reptilian frame, his scales dulled with exhaustion and what appeared to be permanent mosquito bites. Admiral Krynn's compound eyes had developed a nervous twitch from trying to process the tactical impossibility of being lost in Central Park for 8 consecutive days. General Thok'mor had somehow managed to get his massive bulk stuck in a subway turnstile that morning and was still picking bits of MetroCard reader out of his armor. "Gentlemen and Lady," Reynolds began, his diplomatic smile as sharp as a knife, "I trust your stay on Earth has been educational." Inspector Zalthek, who had arrived that morning to find his hunting expedition in complete disarray, clicked his mandibles weakly. "There seems to have been some sort of misunderstanding about your species classification." "Oh, not at all," Dr. Patel interjected, consulting her tablet with the satisfied expression of a scientist whose theories had been thoroughly vindicated. "Your classification was quite accurate. Humans are indeed prey animals. We're just prey animals that evolved on a planet where everything else was trying to eat us for several million years. We got really good at not being eaten." She pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's biodiversity. "You see, most species evolve in relatively stable environments with clearly defined predator-prey relationships. Humans evolved in an environment where the predator-prey relationships changed daily. We had to become adaptable, cooperative, and vindictive enough to hold our own against everything from saber-toothed tigers to each other." Captain Jack Morrison leaned back in his chair with the satisfied expression of someone who had just successfully relocated his most challenging invasive species problem ever. "The thing is, when you've spent your entire evolutionary history dealing with creatures that want to eat you, a bunch of tourists with hunting licenses don't really register as a significant threat." Commander Vex'tar found his voice. "Tourists? Well, what else would you call a group of visitors who show up without proper documentation, ignore local regulations, and expect the locals to accommodate their recreational activities?" Reynolds asked reasonably. "We deal with that sort of thing every summer." The Federation hunters exchanged glances, beginning to realize the true scope of their miscalculation. They had approached Earth expecting to find a planet full of helpless prey animals. Instead, they had discovered a species that treated apex predators from across the galaxy like mildly troublesome vacation guests. "So what happens now?" Admiral Krynn asked, her tactical mind already calculating the political ramifications of returning to the Federation with news of their complete failure. "Well," Reynolds said, consulting his diplomatic notes, "that depends on how quickly you can adapt to the new management structure." "New management structure?" Dr. Patel smiled with the dangerous enthusiasm of a scientist who was about to deliver very unwelcome news. "You see, we've been in contact with several other species that you've classified as prey over the years. Turns out there are quite a few civilizations that would be very interested in discussing alternative approaches to interstellar relations." Ambassador Reynolds nodded. "We're calling it the Galactic Cooperation Initiative. The basic principle is that instead of hunting other species for sport, we work together to solve mutual problems. It's a novel concept, we know, but we think it has potential." "You're overthrowing the Federation?" Vex'tar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Overthrowing seems like such a harsh word," Jack Morrison replied. "We prefer to think of it as ecosystem management. The Federation represents an invasive element in the galactic community. We're simply helping the ecosystem rebalance itself." The negotiations proceeded with the sort of ruthless efficiency that humanity typically reserved for things like hostile corporate takeovers and Black Friday sales. Within 6 hours, the Federation had agreed to a complete restructuring of galactic society, the establishment of diplomatic relations between all spacefaring species, and the conversion of their hunting preserves into collaborative research stations. Inspector Zalthek found himself appointed as the Federation's first ambassador to Earth, a position that came with diplomatic immunity, but also required him to attend weekly cultural sensitivity training sessions run by Mrs. Henderson's kindergarten class. Commander Vex'tar was assigned to head the new interspecies wildlife conservation program, working directly under Captain Morrison to establish proper protocols for managing apex predator populations across the galaxy. Admiral Krynn became the tactical advisor for the Galactic Cooperation Initiative's logistics division, but where her strategic mind would be put to use coordinating resource distribution rather than hunting expeditions. General Thok'mor was appointed as Director of Interspecies Physical Education, a position that involved teaching conflict resolution through competitive sports. His first assignment was organizing a galaxy-wide soccer tournament. As the Federation ships prepared to depart Earth, now equipped with cultural exchange materials, diplomatic protocols, and several crates of mosquito repellent, Ambassador Reynolds stood on the observation deck watching the alien vessels disappear into hyperspace. "Think they'll adapt?" Dr. Patel asked, joining him at the viewport. "They'd better," Reynolds replied. "We've made it very clear that the alternative is being classified as a persistent invasive species. And we've gotten very good at dealing with those." 6 months later, the first Galactic Cooperation Summit was held at the newly established Diplomatic Station Alpha, built from the converted remains of the Federation's largest hunting vessel. Representatives from 47 different species gathered to discuss trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, and the establishment of the galaxy's first interspecies university. The opening ceremony featured a welcome address by Ambassador Reynolds, a scientific presentation by Dr. Call on the benefits of cooperative evolution, and a demonstration of human hospitality that involved enough food to feed a small army, and the sort of aggressive friendliness that made even the most warlike species feel simultaneously welcomed and slightly intimidated. Commander Vex'tar, now wearing a diplomatic sash and a name tag that read "Hello, my name is Vex'tar, Cultural Liaison," stood at the back of the assembly hall watching the proceedings with something approaching wonder. "Still think we're prey animals?" Dr. Patel asked, appearing beside him with a plate of cookies, and the sort of smile that suggested the question wasn't entirely rhetorical. Vex'tar accepted a cookie and considered the question carefully. Around them, representatives from species that had spent millennia as either predators or prey were working together to solve problems that had plagued the galaxy for thousands of years. "I think," he said slowly, "that we may have been using the wrong classification system entirely." Dr. Patel nodded approvingly. "Humans aren't predators or prey, Commander. We're something much more dangerous than that." "Which is?" "Man. We're gardeners. And we've decided it's time to tend the galaxy." In the months that followed, the Federation's annual hunting reports were replaced by diplomatic newsletters featuring articles like successful mediation techniques for territorial disputes and the economic benefits of interspecies trade agreements. The hunting trophies in their great halls were replaced with cultural artifacts and collaborative research awards. And every year, on the anniversary of humanity's first contact with the Galactic Hunting Federation, Earth received a shipment of fruit baskets and apologetic greeting cards from former apex predators who had learned that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is underestimate the species that's been playing the long game for several million years. The cards always included the same message: "Thank you for teaching us that the best way to be at the top of the food chain is to make sure everyone else has enough to eat." Humanity had officially become the galaxy's apex predator, and their first act was to make sure nobody went hungry. It was, the former Federation members agreed, absolutely terrifying in the most wholesome way possible.